Do you want better clients? You know, the ones that value your work, pay more, last longer, are easier to work with, and get the best results when they work with you? Then you need more educated leads, and we'll show you how to get them right here, right now. It's On Air Brands.
You are now tuned in to the On Air Brands podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the On Air Brand Show. I am Todd Giannattasio along with my co-host Amber Fuhriman. Amber, what is going on?
What's up, man? How are you?
You got Jasmine playing around in the background over there.
I know. I never wanted kids, and then I end up with like the most annoying one.
Hey, how is the dog talking buttons going?
I'm not consistent enough with it. I need to be better. She's so smart, and for a long time she was figuring out that the buttons did things. She just hadn't figured out what they did yet.
Yeah.
I think what I want to do is take all the buttons away and restart her.
Yeah.
From the very beginning.
Yeah. You got to go with
So-
one. I remember a long time ago I saw somebody had like put a bell hanging from a
Yeah,
string
yeah.
on the doorknob for like when they wanted to go out, and like that seems so, if you start with just one and it makes something happen, maybe that's the approach to go with.
Yeah, the door or the bell by the door is like a big gateway into it's the gateway drug to buttons.
I love it. Well, speaking of gateway drugs, we're going to talk today about creating that gateway to educate your prospects and leads a little better so that they become more valuable clients. And I was doing a little research for the episode here around why it's so important to have educated buyers when you go through the sales process. And the statistics are, I couldn't find one that was like new enough plus like specific enough, but from the general research I did over the last 5 years, the statistics and research all shows that more educated buyers spend more money, they last longer, they get better results, and that actually people are more likely to buy after they consume some kind of educational content from a brand. And so
Wow.
it's super important, to be putting out educational content. And if you're listening to us, that's always what we preach around what kind of content your show should be about, whether it's videos, blog posts, social posts, or you're just straight up audio episodes. It's what we do, bringing you educational stuff every week. So that's why with your show, being consistent and educating your buyers, it's going to increase the amount of leads who want to buy from you, and it's going to increase the value of the customers. Plus, my favorite part is that once they start working with you, they actually are easier to work with, right? Because they knew what they were getting into. There's no kind of misconception or misunderstanding about what they're getting from you, what they should expect. And they kind of are, they obviously they'll treat you more like an authority and take, especially if you're in a consulting or services type business, instead of them turning you into an order taker, they're going to really respect the proactive approach to what you're bringing from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more beyond that is your ability to build that know, like, and trust factor, because the more that people like you, the more patient they are willing to be in figuring out all of
That's
the
true too.
logistics. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And unfortunately, many times when you're doing things, it's trial by error to get the perfect combination for the perfect client with their perfect clientele. And while you're figuring all that out, the more people know, like, and trust you, the easier that is for them to stand by for.
Yeah. So, I have 5 things listed here. I'm gonna let's make it 6. That they can be topics for you to cover when you're creating your educational content for your weekly show, video, podcast, whatever medium you choose to be putting it out. But at the high level, it's educating them on misconceptions, which depending on your industry can be very valuable, right? Like in my industry for marketing, it's funny. I was listening to your most recent episode of More Than Corporate with what's his name, Gordon
Von Chesnell.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't want to be the one to mispronounce it. So, but he was talking about how there's no regulations in marketing. Like anyone can be a marketer just by changing their social media profile basically and saying like, I'm a digital marketer. And because of that, because there's no license or anything like that, anybody can do it. And so there's so many misconceptions out there of these people who get into the industry and start providing services. And, I'm sure 99% of them are well-intentioned, but they just are not properly educated. And so for me, misconceptions are just rampant when we start talking to new prospects. And so breaking down misconceptions for your potential clients is a huge way to make sure they understand what they're getting into, what they should be expecting, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and a step further than that, you can actually tell people and educate them on how to hire you,
Hmm.
right? So if you do an episode on things you should be asking your next marketer before you hire them,
Yeah.
and those things are all of your strengths, then you're going to get the clients that are best suited for you. And you're going to avoid the clients that are in an area that isn't your wheelhouse. So it's a
Yep.
win-win for everybody involved. That's an
Yeah.
amazing episode for a business to do
Yeah.
when
It
it
really
comes to
helps.
misconception.
Yeah. Getting that pre-qualification before you even have to spend any time is huge. And one of the best, bottom of the funnel lead magnets that we see for clients is the XYZ buyer's guide. Right. So we had a client who actually they successfully exited their company at the end of last year, and they were an HCM, human capital management software and service provider. And the best lead magnet that we had for them over the years was the HCM buying guide. Right. And it's like that's a complex B2B sale when you're buying human capital management software. So it's like, what am I supposed to, what do I need to know, and all those kind of different things. And that was great, not just for generating leads, but then educating those leads so that they could, like you said, pre-qualify themselves to work with you because of the criteria that you set forth, or and educate them so that when you have those discussions, those quote unquote sales discussions become much more conversational about like, hey, you already know the deal. Here's our answers to those questions, and we can move forward accordingly. And it's more of a conversational close versus like, hey, we need to convince you on why you need to buy from us.
Yeah, absolutely. And side note, I was talking to somebody the other day during a discovery call for coaching, and I asked him how long he had been self-employed, and his response was that he fired his boss a year ago. And I was like, that's the best answer I've
Yeah.
ever gotten. I fired my boss.
Yeah, I love that. Hopefully that wasn't while he was self-employed, but
I know, right? It's true. It's true.
um, so that's great. So we talked misconceptions are definitely make one episode. So we've talked about this in the past about different topics, but having one episode where you're like, here are 10 misconceptions, and then you can then have 10 episodes based one for each misconception. Same thing
Yes.
on like, here's how to hire an immigration attorney. Here's the 5 things you need to know, and then having 5 episodes after that breaking down each one. It's a very easy way to have an overview and then a full series of content to help give people something to binge listen or binge watch as they're educating themselves.
Yeah, a lot of times when we create content, because we're in our business every single day, we make it way too complicated. And this is something I
Hmm.
have to remind myself of all the time,
Yeah.
is when we break that down into those individual episodes, we feel like it's so simple.
Yeah.
But the person who's listening to it, they don't know what they don't know about anything that you do. And so you're giving them a ton of information they've never heard before. So it's really important to remember that just because it feels simple to you doesn't mean that it's unvaluable to your target market.
Yeah, and it's something that you're thinking about all day, every day. You've spent years thinking about it. You don't even think about it anymore. It's it at a subconscious level. But it's something that, depending on what you're selling, your prospects probably don't think about it ever, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, things
Or
that we
prefer
think,
not to, which is why they're hiring you.
right? Yeah, exactly. And so, being able to do that is super important. So, the next thing after that buying criteria and how to hire is mistakes, right? So, like, what mistakes do you see people making? Either, and this depends on your industry or your target customer's current state. Is it mistakes people are making when they're trying to do it themselves? And so avoid these mistakes trying to do it yourself. And if you want help, we can help you. Or is it also mistakes in that hiring criteria, right? Like, here's the 3 mistakes I see small business owners making when posting on social media, is very different than here's 3 mistakes I see small business owners making when hiring a social media agency, right?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of educational content that can be super, super valuable for your audience.
Yeah. And there's another side of this that you got to be careful with, but is super valuable as well if you do it from the right place. And that's, what mistakes have you made? Right. There's something about knowing that the person that you're hiring is human
Yeah.
and makes mistakes. And then more than that, there's something about knowing that if that person does make a mistake, they're going to be willing to have a conversation with you about it. And so, it's a way for you to be able to connect with people on a human level, show them that you're trustworthy because you're willing to talk about your mistakes. There's a difference between, these are the mistakes that I made. Like, there was this one time I just screwed it up and this is how I fixed it. There's a difference between that and being like self-deprecating. And so you've got to be careful how you do it. If you plan the episode right, though, it can be really empowering for you and your audience.
Yeah. It's important to know how to tell stories in that way that reveal your vulnerability and show that you're human, and then also how recovering and how you're better than that now, right?
The how I fixed it part is the most
Right.
important part of that
Yeah.
episode, right?
As we're talking about this, I think there's another part of mistakes that can be talked about, and that's like, what mistakes are actually acceptable, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's some mistakes that, like, all right, if you did this, it's over, right? Like, this was detrimental to the business. We lost X amount of dollars, or our client, it was bad for the brand or whatever. And then there's other things, like, for me, typos are, who cares? I could really care less about typos. It doesn't make a difference. I'd rather move quicker and have typos than not. And so, but different people
The
have different
attorney in me
standards.
is twitching just a little bit, just so you know.
Yeah, but like, everybody has different things, and that also depends. We're in a business where I'm saying, for my brand, I don't care if there's typos. If we were doing marketing for your law firm, typos are going to matter in that content, right? So it's all about the context and understanding. And again, that's the same thing. If I were a marketing firm for attorneys and I did an episode on like 5 mistakes that are okay for your marketing agency to make and 5 that are not. Here's one that's not: typos. You can't have typos in your marketing if you're an attorney, because XYZ, blah, blah, blah. If that happens, that's a 3-strike rule mistake. Here are 0-strike rules, right? Like, you posted something from another brand's account, or whatever. Like, so I think that type of stuff, like acceptable versus unacceptable mistakes, is another good angle to take if you need educational content for your shows.
Yeah, I agree. It also helps you set expectations for what people can expect from you, which 90% of the time where there's an argument or a disagreement between a service provider and the client, it's because expectations weren't clearly set to begin with.
Yep. Yeah. And this is something that I do less of now. But it was something I used to do very intentionally. When I had first and second meetings with prospects, I would curse even more than I normally would, to set the expectation of, like, if you're not comfortable with some, and not like over the top or derogatory, I would just make sure to I think that our shows are G-rated for the platforms, but I'd drop an F-bomb once in a while, or whatever, but conversationally, so that they knew this person, this guy curses. If you're not comfortable with that kind of thing, like, that's totally fine with me, but that's just how I talk. And I'm gonna do it accidentally if I'm not supposed to in the future.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. I always wonder how I've made it through 10 years of court appearances completely cuss word free.
Yeah, that's
but
pretty
my
impressive.
mom, and I know, right?
Is that a rule, or just a
it's pretty much a rule.
Yeah,
the moment I walk out of the courthoom is a different story, though. Sometimes I don't even let the door shut first, and then I'm like, shoot, I hope nobody heard that. So on this topic, this goes for everything, not just, the way that you talk. But I had this conversation with my mom about my law firm, because anybody who's walked in my law firm, like, I'm in jeans, I'm in t-shirts. If I'm not in court, I am not dressed up at all. I actually keep a change of clothes in my office because I hate being in a suit or in slacks.
Yeah.
Some of the guys that I rent my office from walk around in slippers. Like it's a comfort thing, right? So my mom used to ask me, she's like, aren't you afraid somebody's going to come in and they're going to see the way that you are at your office and think, man, I'm not going to hire her? And I'm like, good.
Yeah, that's what
Because
I'm
I would
hoping happens.
rather like they make that decision before they realize who I am when I put
Right.
on a good face in the consult meeting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, so next on the list of content to create to have more educated leads is spotting bogus info. And I think, for attorneys, this is probably huge. With, like I said, if you have an industry where it's a low barrier to entry, like the marketing industry, like, again, here's bogus info. If you see people promising you these things, if you see people doing these things, like, I think for marketing, things change very quickly. So it could be, here's 3 outdated practices of digital marketing that you need to make sure your agency is avoiding, right? Like, this is how you can spot an outdated agency, right? And there's a couple, like, for SEO, and this is something for everybody here listening, make a note of. SEO, people talk about keywords, and keywords are very important, but that's more of a conversational word. It's not a technical term. And so there's not a place, there used to be 10 plus years ago, and even then it didn't really matter. But like, if you ask your agency, will you place keywords in the technical area for my website, and they say yes, of course, and they say yes, and they have that conversation, they don't know what they're talking about, because there's actually not a technical quote unquote keyword place in a website or on a web page. And so that's an easy trick where you're like, will you embed keywords, and they say yes. And so, but those types of things are ways to help. Like, here's bogus information that you can help spot.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm looking for an example, which here it is. Okay, so I'm not going to out anybody because I'm not that person. However, there is a particular Facebook group that it says, using our proven methods in conjunction with the business guru, we can give you the tools and support that will enable you to increase your profits by 19%, 57%, or 81%. So
that's very specific.
It's very specific, and I want to
a-
know which one it's going to be,
Yeah.
19, 57, or 81, based upon how much I'm paying you.
I
So,
wonder
like,
if that means that they've had 3 clients.
maybe. I mean, I have
Right? I mean,
no
and those are the 3.
idea. And I mean, it does say, feel free to ask me where those numbers came from. But
That's funny.
in the coaching space, there's like, if anybody says, I'll help you increase your business by a percentage, I'm like, I'm out. Like, you cannot guarantee that.
Yeah.
And then also, if anybody's like, make, $7 million in 22.5 seconds,
Right.
like, that's
Well,
amazing.
sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I was in scrolling through Facebook posts trying to waste time one day when I had none to waste. And somebody made a post and they were like, hey, I'm looking for a second job. Does anybody have any suggestions on a job that I can find that's not going to take much time, doesn't take much startup, and is going to make me a lot of money? Like, when you find it, let me know.
Yeah. I'll follow. Yeah, I'm hitting the follow button on that post so that I can see it when it comes out, for sure.
It's true. So
Yeah.
those are things to look for, right? If you look at a post in any field and you say, man, I just don't like that, doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
It's probably something to be cautious about and have a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so next on the list I have here, and we could probably figure out a better headline for this bullet to articulate, but how to determine your best path forward. And it goes back to that buying criteria like we talked about before, but in a different way. So, like, think about how many times you talk to someone when you're buying something, or people come to you when they're buying from you, and your answer is, well, it depends, right? Like, how much is we need a new website. How much is it going to cost? Well, it depends. We need marketing. How much? It depends. How, I need to stay out of jail. Well, it depends. Like, did you get a speeding ticket, or did you,
kill someone? Yeah.
And so it depends. And I think being able to create content and have episodes where you talk through it depends on this, and here's how to figure it out. Like, how much should my website cost? Well, it depends on the type of functionality, how large it's going to be. Do you want to launch it quick and then grow, or do you want it all complete before you go live? And here's how you can navigate. And there's different parts of websites, and here's how. And so figuring out what are all the secondary questions of it depends, and talking through those in an episode or series, again, like turning this into a series, is another great way to educate your leads to become great clients for you.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to ask clients when I'm talking to them is, how will you know that this relationship is successful? And I think we've
Hmm.
talked about this before.
Yeah.
So if you gauge an episode like that and you say, the cost of this is going to depend on what your definition of success is in this business relationship, and here are some spots along the spectrum,
Hmm.
then you're going to give them much more information to think about and be prepared to answer the question that you should inevitably be asking them, which is, how will you know that this relationship is successful?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, next on the list we have things to stop doing, right? And this is, very helpful in the coaching business type of area, but it's like a lot of times everyone wants to push on the gas harder when in reality all they need to do is take their foot off the brake.
Yeah.
And so like what are some things people are doing that are causing them more problems or weighing them down that they don't realize, and showing them here's mistakes to stop making, or here's extra things you can stop doing that are holding you back from getting to where you want to go, as opposed to trying to do more things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then lastly on our list, which is frequently asked questions. We talked about this in last week's episode too, when we talked about the attraction content, but and FAQs are good for each stage. When we get to the educated buyers, we're now taking them past like, oh, they had a trigger event where they have a problem and they have a question about this problem. Well, now we're in a place where they have frequently asked questions about your product or service. And so this stage is where you can talk about answering those types of questions and say, when a lot of people are hiring marketing agencies, here's the top 5 questions they ask, and here's our answers to them. Or, when you're looking for an attorney, here's the 5 questions, before you hire someone.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. And remember, guys, when you think about creating your content, go back to the episode that Todd and I really dug into, where we talked about the 4 types of listeners and how to really create content that's going to talk to all of them. And just that little recap of that, because of this FAQ situation, is you have your why people that want to know why they're listening to you. You have your what people who want to know what they're listening to. You have your how people that need at least a little bit of how you're going to accomplish what you're going to accomplish. And then you have your what if people, and those are your FAQ people. Those are the people who want to know every single scenario that could possibly go wrong. And they give you a ton of content to be able to put into your episode, because you can take a question and you can turn it into an episode with why, what, how, and then wrap it up with what if. So just keep in mind those 4 types of people as you're creating your content.
Yeah. As you said that, it just sprung to mind a last one, and that's worst case scenarios. I think that's another area where you can create content where, if you've ever part of Jordan Belfort's sales training, he talks about the 2 movies that are running in someone's mind, and everyone's thinking about, okay, if I buy, here's the best case scenario, here's the stuff I love and I'm very excited about, and that's your optimistic side. But then there's always the critic, and that's usually the one when you're buying something, your critic is going to be, your skeptical side is going to be stronger, and it's running through worst case scenarios, which are like the most absurd thing, where it's like, well, if I hire this marketing agency and it doesn't work out, then and then we're going to be on a call one day and I'm going to forget that the stove is on, and it's going to light my kitchen on fire and the house is going to burn down, right? Like, and like, so tying that in with something that Tim Ferriss talks about too, just for self-development, and it's, what is the worst case scenario if I fail? And when you can say like, okay, there's these absurd negative stories, they're not going to happen. The worst case scenario is that we run a campaign for 4 days and we spent $80 and we find out that no one clicked on it and we turn it off, and now we come out with a new message, right? And now all of a sudden, my negative movie is not my house burning down because we were yelling at each other on a bad phone call, but rather that, oh, I spent $80 and we're going to launch new ads next week, right? And so I think addressing worst case scenarios and helping people stop the negative movie that they're running and jump more into the optimistic movie that they have running.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I want to push back just a little bit on it from the
Mhm.
sales perspective, because I
Mhm.
think this is where you can get some really big traction by capitalizing on what they believe the worst case scenario
Mhm.
is. So, like, if I have somebody in the coaching realm that says, well, what's the worst case scenario? And you know that they're going crazy. Well, the worst case scenario is that your life doesn't get better and you can continue to lose money. Is
Right.
that realistic? No, but that's the worst case scenario. And that's what's
Right.
going to happen if you do nothing. So now let's
Right.
talk about
Yep.
what the worst case scenario is when we're involved together. So it's a great way as a content provider to re-engage them by showing them that their worst case scenario, as long as it's realistic, like their
Right.
house isn't going to burn down because they don't hire me.
Right.
But as long as it's realistic, like you can focus on the worst case scenario that's in your head is in your head because you're
Right.
not currently taking action.
Well, this is a great point and a great segue into next week. And just to clarify, when I said worst case scenario, I meant the worst case scenario if you do hire me.
Oh yeah.
So we
Sorry
want
about
to
that.
we want to mitigate their negative stories around if we move forward. The worst case that's going to happen is you're going to spend X amount of dollars and this is going to be, they're going to be poor results, but we're lean and we make whatever it is. Every business is going to be different, but you want to mitigate those negative stories about if we work together. This is the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's not the end of the world. What
Yeah.
you're talking about is a great topic, a great point for us to discuss next week, and that's creating content that's going to help convert people into actual buyers, right? So after last week's episode, you now know what kind of content to create to increase your awareness and attract the right audience to your business. Today, we talked about educating those buyers. So now we have sales qualified leads that are ready to convert and become sales conversations, buy from your sales page, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to be breaking that down in the next episode when we talk about creating content that converts your leads into clients and customers. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite platform. Go to onairbrands.com/show to get on the email list and never miss an episode. And we will catch you next week.